Okay, it seems like we have a good crowd developing, so let's get started. Welcome to the first event in our Provost Distinguished Speaker Series for the academic year. I am your somewhat new Provost, Carl Lejwe. The Provost Distinguished Speaker Series is an annual event where we invite our recently appointed and highly esteemed Board of Trustees, distinguished professors, and endowed chairs to share their cutting-edge scholarship with us. Like many things in the past several months, we've had to adjust to a new normal, and the format for this series is no exception as we've pivoted to a virtual format. We're really pleased to share this opportunity to bring our community together in appreciation and celebration of the exceptional work that's being done at UConn. And that's really at the heart of who we are as a research university. I would be remiss to not acknowledge the work it has taken to arrange this series, which has been managed primarily by Amanda Pitts in our office in partnership with Vice Provost Michael Bradford, who is our local czar for the development of our people. I want to thank Board of Trustees Professor C. Michael White, or Mike, for starting us off in this series with his talk today. I'll say in my short time here, I've had several really impressive interactions with Mike, both in me having the opportunity to hear about his research vision for the School of Pharmacy, and also as an expert department head sharing best practices for his peers. He really is someone who embodies the full set of roles we look for from our senior leaders. We've asked Pharmacy Dean Phil Richko to introduce Professor White in his talk, Shining Light in the Shadows, My Work in Dietary Supplements. But before I hand it over, I want to say a few words about Phil. Phil's a clinical professor of pharmacy practice, and he's been a very effective leader for the School of Pharmacy since 2019, and most recently appointed Dean of the School. He's overseen a rise in funded research, improvements to the student pathway to the PharmD degree, and an increase in students coming to the program despite all the challenges of COVID. The school has also seen an impressive rise in philanthropic funding. Simply put, Phil has been a terrific force for good in the school in his time at UConn, and particularly in the past few years in his dean's role. So with that, thank you all for being here, and Phil, I turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Carl. Hey, it's my pleasure to be here today and to join you at this distinguished seminar, and to be able to introduce an individual that I've gotten to know through the years, many years actually. I've been at UConn 17 years in total, and I've known Mike prior to that even. So I've known him for quite a long period of time, and he's been in the role of my boss for a number of those years itself. We've developed a very cordial and good friendship and relationship through the years. And it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Dr. C. Michael White. I've got the greatest admiration for him as a scholar, a teacher, and university and public servant. His individual accomplishments are even more remarkable, considering the fact that he's spent approximately the past 10 years doing an outstanding job as our Department of Pharmacy Practice department head, which is an accomplishment unto itself. Dr. White received his BS and his Doctor of Pharmacy degrees from the Albany College of Pharmacy in Albany, New York, part of Union University, and completed a postdoctoral fellowship in cardiovascular pharmacology and outcomes at Hartford Hospital in UConn in 1998. Dr. White joined the faculty at the UConn School of Pharmacy in 1998 and was named department head for pharmacy practice in 2011. And he was named a Board of Trustees Distinguished Professor this year. Dr. White received the UConn Provost Award for Public Engagement, the American College of Clinical Pharmacy Young Investigator of the Year Award, the American Association of Colleges of Pharmacy Lyman Award, the American Society of Health System Pharmacists Award for sustained contributions to the literature, and was a 5-time ASHP Foundation Drug Therapy Research Awardee. His 435 publications have over 13,000 citations, yielding an H-index of 61, and 10 of his publications have an almetric score in between 100 and 700. He has published numerous articles in JAMA and the Annals of Internal Medicine, as well as publishing in other premier journals like The Lancet and Circulation. His media pieces in the conversations have been approximately 826,000 views, second at UConn only to Richard Bug Stevens. Dr. White has appeared in approximately 500 major media pieces on TV, radio, newspaper, and magazines, including The Dr. Oz Show, the NPR Morning Edition, CBS Radio Network, the New York Times, Washington Post, Boston Globe, Vogue, and Newsweek, as well as having a reoccurring Ask the Pharmacist segment on Fox 61 News, our local news station here in the greater Hartford area. Dr. White is a section editor for the Annals of Pharmacotherapy and guest editor for the Journal of Clinical Pharmacology. And finally, he is the University Teaching Fellow and a Fellow for the American College of Clinical Pharmacologists and the American College of Clinical Pharmacy. So it is a great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. C. Michael White.
Hi, everyone. So there's 3 main research lines that we've been conducting in the over 20 years that I've been at the University of Connecticut. One is on systematic reviews and meta-analysis. That is the most financially lucrative research line that we had. And I presented that information at President Katsouleas's inauguration. And if you want to see it, it's 7 minutes of pure gold, and you can see it there on YouTube. The second one is preventing cardiac drug, device, or surgical induced diseases. And the main thrust of that was our atrial fibrillation suppression trials, where we were trying to decrease post-cardiothoracic surgery arrhythmias. But I didn't choose those. What I chose was this third one, understanding the risks and benefits of dietary supplements, because I figured that if you're not having cardiothoracic surgery, or if you don't understand the processes, that could be very, very technical. The one on systematic reviews and meta-analyses had already been covered, and dietary supplements, everyone is interested in. And I know everyone's interested in because when we had articles and then the op-eds that have come from those articles, you can see that a couple of the ones in dietary supplements have had close to 200 to almost 400,000 people that wanted to view it. It also has resulted in things like media sources like the Dr. Oz Show and other people wanting to talk about dietary supplements. So why are people so interested in dietary supplements? It's because everyone can get their hands on it right now. If you don't even know what it's going to be used for, you can still buy it, right? So dietary supplements are in a healthcare world unto themselves due to the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994 that states that the FDA does not approve supplements. They can be created and put onto the shelves and sold to patients without the FDA having to look at any of that data ahead of time. The FDA has a responsibility to prove that an herbal product or an ingredient in herbal products are harmful before they can be removed, right? So this is innocent until proven guilty, where usually when you're talking about drugs or over-the-counter products, those products have to be shown to be effective and safe before they are allowed to come out on the market. Now, they designed the law the way they did because they wanted to try to increase patient access and keep costs low by preventing government interference with patient self-care. But what this has led to is that the FDA is always now 2 steps behind in trying to protect the public. They need to do general surveillance And then if they think there's potential issues, they then need to start studying it. And only when they find out that there truly is an issue can they take action. And that's a problem, as we'll go through and we'll describe. So $35 billion are spent annually on dietary supplements. And dietary supplements can encompass all of those things: vitamins, minerals, herbs, botanicals, and extracts. So one of the first issues that I found when I was looking at dietary supplements are in the area of adulteration. So we would expect that when you buy a dietary supplement that you're not getting a prescription drug or an over-the-counter drug, but that is not always the case. So the FDA had found out that in the areas of sexual enhancement drugs, or dietary supplements, in weight loss dietary supplements, or muscle building dietary supplements, that some of the products were being adulterated. So they did a very extensive assessment of those products, and they found out that 954 companies' supplements also contain prescription drugs. So let's say that you can't take Viagra because you're taking other drugs like nitrates and they're contraindicated, so you decide to use a natural option. Well, there's a very good chance that that natural option that you're picking actually contains Viagra or a drug within that same class, putting you at potential risk. In weight loss supplements, what they found was that drugs that were banned from the US market because they had been shown to be dangerous are just reappearing unbeknownst to the patient or the doctor in their dietary supplements. So what about heavy metal contamination? Well, a lot of the products in some way or another end up falling short in meeting good manufacturing practices, as you see up to 5% of dietary supplements. In this small sample of dietary supplements that were assessed had too much heavy metal in it. When they looked at other products, specifically coming from India, they found that up to 20% of the products had excessive levels of heavy metals. And how big is just one of these products? Well, let me just give you an example. In June of 2019, the FDA seized 300,000 containers from Life Rising Corporation because the products tested positive for excessive levels of lead. So up to this point, what we've been talking about are millions of patients that can be exposed to these products. But then there's also mold and bacterial contamination. And you can see that one specific product, Kratom, made by many different manufacturers, had been found to be contaminated with salmonella. And lots of other dietary supplements have been found to be contaminated from time to time as well. But in this one, there was 199 adverse events, and that included 50 hospitalizations. Then we have the bait and switch, where the New York Attorney General went through and they did DNA barcoding testing of dietary supplements, and they found that a lot of dietary supplements that were being sold in New York State actually did not contain the active ingredient that was written on the label. And then we have this problem of you think that you're buying one product, but instead you're buying another dietary supplement. And you can see that this dietary supplement was banned by the FDA, Aristocolia, and several years after it was banned, they went through and they looked at a large number of Chinese products, and they found that in 7% of the products which had historically contained it but now were banned, they still contained that banned herbal supplement. What were the issues that developed? Well, 105 patients, as a result of that issue, ended up developing kidney damage, and 43 had kidney damage that was so severe that they reached end-stage kidney disease within several years. Now, this is something that is not on the label. You wouldn't know if you looked at it. You think you're getting something else, but instead you're getting this. They also found 18 cases of cancer. So people need to not rely on the FDA for assuring that their products are safe. What they need to do is to only buy products that are verified by independent labs and being proven to be safe. And here are 3 on your screen now. Well, what happens when you have an herbal product or a dietary supplement that it is manufactured with good manufacturing processes. Are they safe? Well, the important thing in this second third of the lecture today is to get you to realize that the absence of safety data does not equal being safe. Just because you don't know that something is dangerous because you've never looked at it doesn't mean, therefore, that it is safe. Now, all prescription drugs, before they can be studied in patients, have to be studied in normal volunteers. And one of the things that they do ubiquitously, they test for changes in the EKG and blood pressure. So I was very surprised back in the late 1990s that no dietary supplements have had these kinds of tests. And those kinds of tests are relatively inexpensive to do, and they can be done relatively quickly. But yet here are products that are being used in millions and millions of people that have never had these types of assessments. So we wanted to change that. And we ran a series of EKG and blood pressure studies in normal volunteers that looked at a variety of different dietary supplements. And we didn't find any negative effects when we looked at a lot of those dietary supplements. But then one day, an electrophysiologist at Hartford Hospital who'd been working on with the cardiothoracic surgery research line called me and said, well, I just had something really strange happen. I had this patient who had come in who has an implantable cardioverter defibrillator that measures the patient's heart rhythm, and then when they start having arrhythmias, will shock the patient out of the rhythm. This person who had been stable for a lot of years just had multiple shocks over the course of the day from that ICD. And so we went in and we talked to the patient, and we found out that the only thing that was different is the patient had started taking this dietary supplement that contained ephedra. So we decided to look at ephedra and measure its EKG and blood pressure effects using this type of crossover design, where you start out with some patients taking ephedra and some of the subjects taking placebo. And then after you do the study where we measured the EKG and the blood pressure effects over the course of several hours, we ended up having a 1 week washout period, and then people got the alternative therapy that they didn't get before in that second phase. And this is the same type of study that we did with all of the other natural products that we had discussed on the previous slide. And we used 1/2 of the lowest recommended dose, so 12 milligrams of ephedra, and then having that be combined with caffeine. And remember that one of the things that caffeine does that helps you feel more awake is it helps to slow down the breakdown of the adrenaline and the norepinephrine that you have floating around in your bloodstream. So what we found with this 1/2 of the lowest recommended dose when it was given to normal volunteers is that the systolic blood pressure went up by 4.6 millimeters of mercury. Now, you might not think that that is a lot, but you have to remember that these young, healthy college students have what they call baroreceptor buffering capacity. And when you look at people who are over the age of 65, people who are obese, or people who already have hypertension, increases in normal volunteers in this range are usually the same as blood pressure increases of around 10 to 15 millimeters of mercury in that population. And that's just the average. The standard deviation in some of them can go up much higher. And then we also looked at the EKG, specifically at the QTc interval. And what we found was that the QTc interval on average was 27 milliseconds higher. Now, one of the risks that the FDA has for prescription drugs or over-the-counter drugs is if your drug can increase the QTc interval by greater than 30 milliseconds from baseline. And what we found was that 53% of our normal healthy college students ended up having an increase that was above that range, as compared to only 6.7% of people who ended up receiving placebo. If your QTc interval goes up too long, you're at risk for this arrhythmia. And this arrhythmia can end up causing very, very low blood pressure and can also result in death. So it's a medical emergency if you were to get that. So we presented this information at the American Heart Association meeting, and when we were done, we were met by people from the Food and Drug Administration, and they said, we want you to send all of your study records and everything else to us. Do it as quickly as you can. We really need to look at your data. So we sent them all of our data, and they looked at it, and they sent it back to us, and they said, everything looks really good. We want you to try to publish this as soon as possible. So we wrote our manuscript to JAMA, and we sent it in. They contacted us, and they said, we want to coordinate for when your manuscript is going to be coming out. They didn't say why, but on the day that our manuscript was published, the FDA announced that they were removing ephedra from the US market. Now, what we didn't know is that they had taken our data and they had gotten a subpoena for the phone records of some of the companies that were making these products. And when they went in, they found thousands of cases of strokes and heart attacks and hundreds of cases of arrhythmias that should have been sent to the FDA, but were never transmitted to the FDA. So we wanted to try to understand why ephedra was causing the QTc elevations. Was it because it was stimulating the beta-1 adrenoceptor, the beta-2 adrenoceptor, or the alpha-1 adrenoceptor, or was it due to something else entirely? So what we did is a study in people who were coming in to get their implantable cardioverter defibrillators tested, and we gave them infusions of epinephrine, norepinephrine, and placebo. Now, the big difference between epinephrine and norepinephrine is that epinephrine stimulates all three of those adrenoceptors that we talked about before, where norepinephrine only stimulates two of them. It does not stimulate beta-2. And what we found was that epinephrine did increase the QTc interval, but that norepinephrine did not. And that ephedra is much more like epinephrine than it was like norepinephrine. So with that, we were able to work out the mechanism. And then we looked at another thing called bitter orange. And bitter orange is from the of the Seville orange. And it actually has some slight beta-1 effects and some modest alpha-1 effects. And so we anticipated that we would not have seen negative effects on the EKG. And we didn't. It helps to underscore that the potential mechanism was due to the stimulation of beta-2 receptors. So now we're 2/3 of the way through the talk, and I said a lot of bad things about dietary supplements. But the reality is that some dietary supplements do work. And we've shown in a number of cases that dietary supplements do have a role to play in helping to improve patients' care, especially if you buy products that are manufactured with good manufacturing practices. But in this section, we only have time to talk about one, and we're going to try to focus on magnesium. So magnesium can prevent that arrhythmia that we were talking about before, called torsades. One of the things that we did is we did this animal study in 10 rabbits, and then we gave them an experimental drug that ended up never being used in humans, because when they use it in animals, its risk of causing torsades was just unacceptably high. So we used the same drug and we doubled the dose because we wanted to get torsades. And along with that drug, clofelium, we either gave them an infusion of normal saline, or we gave them an infusion of magnesium sulfate. And what we found was that the rabbits who had gotten the magnesium sulfate were much less likely to develop torsades than the ones who had been given placebo. So we wanted to know if the mechanism had anything to do with the QTc interval, because when you give magnesium by itself, it doesn't do anything, either positively or negatively, to the QTc interval. And what we found was that while it might not do anything when it was given alone, when you gave it along with an IV drug that you know increases the QTc interval, that you can dramatically decrease the amount of QTc interval prolongation that you experience. And that's what we showed in this clinical trial. Magnesium sulfate reduced the risk of an ibutylide-induced QTc interval increase, either greater than 60 milliseconds or greater than 500 milliseconds, by between 60 and 68%. So then we began to wonder, there's a lot of prescription drugs that are out there that prolong the QTc interval, and they have a lot of good overall effects, but they run the risk of this side effect. So could you make this side effect less likely to occur with chronic therapy by giving people oral magnesium? So up to this point, we were looking at IV magnesium for an acute effect. Now we're trying to look at chronic therapy. So we looked at two of these drugs, sotalol and dofetilide, and we ended up giving either magnesium lactate or placebo. And then we looked at a couple different things. One is we wanted to look at what was happening in terms of their intracellular magnesium concentrations. And one of the things that we found was that in this population of patients who were receiving sotalol or dofetilide for atrial or ventricular arrhythmias, that they had an innate baseline intracellular magnesium deficiency. So even though their serum concentrations were normal, inside of their cells, they had a magnesium deficiency. So what we found was that not only could you help to normalize within that 48-hour time frame their intracellular magnesium concentrations, but in addition, you could significantly reduce their QTc interval. So our hope was that we could create something that people could put in prescription drugs, in the design of those prescription drugs, or within IV prescription drugs, that when they're infusing a drug that may prolong the QTc interval, that they could give along with it that would help to decrease the harm that could be caused by the QTc prolongation. Well, one of the things that we were worried about is that if you're not prolonging the QTc and you're an antiarrhythmic drug, maybe the drug isn't going to work as well. So you'd be decreasing harm, but you would also be decreasing efficacy. So we did this cohort study where we looked at 229 consecutive patients who received ibutylide in the presence or absence of intravenous magnesium. And what we found was that magnesium actually increased the chances of successful cardioversion versus using ibutylide alone. So it looked like it was being more effective at the same time that it was enhancing safety. So the conclusions from today's talk. Thank you all for coming, joining, and hearing some of the things about dietary supplements today. Some dietary supplements are safe and they do work. Some are a scam and others are downright dangerous. So if you want to use a natural product, if you believe it's going to be helpful for you, please only use products that are verified by independent outside labs like USP and NSF. Ephedra products were risky to the cardiovascular system, but they were also billion-dollar drugs, billion-dollar dietary supplements, okay, before they were removed and being shown to be unsafe. Giving magnesium along with dietary supplements or with drugs can attenuate the QTc interval prolongation and may reduce the risks of torsades. There's been a number of major drugs that have been removed from the US market, including antihistamines, some antibiotics, specifically for its risks of torsades. And there may be a better way in terms of drug development. If that's a problem with your individual drug, maybe combining with magnesium could be the key. We tried to file a patent application, and the patent office said that it was too obvious that it would have beneficial effects, and they didn't give it to us. And then we tried to come back and say, really? Seriously? And then they came back and they said, yes. So right now, anyone in the universe can use that. It's free and open to the world. Finally, magnesium may enhance the antiarrhythmic efficacy of QTc prolonging antiarrhythmic drugs in patients who are being treated for atrial or other ventricular arrhythmias. And then finally, collaboration is the key to success. And there's been many people who have been helpful along the course of my career. And clearly, I would not have been as successful without the help of all of these people. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to now have a conversation with Mike.
All right, Dr. White, fantastic, fantastic. Can you see me?
I see you just fine.
All right, great. I don't see me, so it's a little bit hard. That was fantastic. I think I actually followed a good bit of it. There's one question that I think that has to be asked first, and that is, are you still good in the rabbit community?
Actually, these were actually really, really pretty rabbits too. They were like New Zealand white rabbits. You know, they were really pretty. But you know, when I first started in my fellowship, we were doing mostly animal research, and then over the course of time, we ended up transitioning over to doing all human research. And I guess the best part is that you know, we always tried to do projects that we thought were directly linked to things that would be really important for humans, but that we really couldn't do a study like that in humans. So right. I don't know if you can, you know, maybe you're a very persuasive guy, but I don't know if you can trick people into doing a study where you want to try to give them a lethal ventricular arrhythmia and see whether the group could get it. I'm not that persuasive.
That doesn't sound good. That doesn't sound good. I don't think I want to be that persuasive. So, but fantastic. I so appreciate this conversation. You're right. This is something that we can all walk out of our doors and into you know, a drugstore and put our hands on this. And so I'm feeling like I should go sweep my medicine cabinet right now and just toss stuff out just to be on the safe side. What prompted you to jump into this research, this particular research?
It was very surprising to me that you know, that the law was written the way it was written, and I worried about with a lack of oversight, would raw capitalism with no accountability or very little accountability yield low-cost products, or would it yield products that were low cost in exchange for being low quality? So remember, when you go to the drugstore, you know, and you look at this product and you look at that product, and they both have 20 milligrams of what it is that it says on the label. How do you know which one is better than the other? I mean, there's really no way to tell. So what a lot of people will do is they'll either try to get a celebrity to say that theirs is better, right? Or they'll try to compete based on price, or they'll try to have a very fancy bottle to get you to be able to buy it. And I think when you look at all of the different components together, none of those are actually a great way of really being able to discern what is a quality product versus what is a scam product or a potentially dangerous product. And then, you know, outside of that also, just whether or not natural products by themselves could work. And, you know, we saw that there's been some hits and there's been some misses. A lot of the soluble fibers we looked at ended up working really, really well. Echinacea, to try to decrease how long the common cold lasts, it has some decent evidence. Is it safe to use? We don't know. It has not been studied rigorously enough to know what its overall safety is. But at least in terms of effectiveness, there is some effectiveness when you're talking about the common cold. Going to do anything to COVID-19? I don't know. No data. Okay. But, you know, so, I mean, that's really what fascinated me. The thing that was very disheartening about it is that there's very, very little funding in the area of dietary supplements because no company wants to spend a lot of money to be able to show that that ingredient works really well in an environment where everyone else can just make knockoff versions of your version and then sell it for much cheaper, right? So we ended up doing this research line mostly just as a labor of love, rather than something that would pay the bills like the meta-analysis and systematic review research line does.
Indeed. Well, I'm glad you did. I'm sufficiently terrified now, and we'll be reading everything on that particular label. There are a couple of words here. I didn't catch everything, but there are a couple of words I thought, okay, I'm looking for that. If it's on the bottle, I'm not picking up that particular bottle. And on that note, what really fascinated me is your earlier conversation about the FDA and their mode in this conversation, like where they stand in this particular conversation. And I understand that, you're innocent until proven guilty but it does seem to me like maybe they would not talk about the efficacy of the vitamin or the organic or whichever, but that they would certainly be looking at ingredients and some things that are banned and some things that are questionable. But it sounds like that didn't happen at all.
No. And so what you have to understand about the FDA is that the FDA has undergone a tremendous transformation over the course from the 1980s to the present. Mm-hmm. And it has not been, in some ways, it's been very good because the amount of time it takes for new drugs to end up getting approved has been radically decreased. And so all of those changes happened as a result of the HIV epidemic, and they started coming out with good drugs that would potentially benefit a number of patients, but it took a really, really long time to get them approved. So they ended up allowing drug companies to be able to, through user fees, be able to support some of the work for the FDA. Mm-hmm. That meant that the companies only wanted their dollars to go towards approving new drugs. And what we've seen is that an FDA that was relatively balanced to all of the different things that they needed to do continued to grow and grow and grow in terms of approving new drugs faster and faster. Right. But they ended up taking money away from all of those other areas and diverting it into that area. So the FDA does not have the funds to be able to look at every dietary supplement and make sure that it has active ingredients, that it doesn't have heavy metals, that it doesn't have contamination. If they see a number of cases that are being reported to them, they have money to be able to go in and explore it, to be able to see how bad is it really. And in the area of weight loss products and sexual enhancement drugs, it was horrible. Every company was putting prescription products inside, lots of malfeasance in that area. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that there's not prescription drugs in other products. It just means that the FDA has not had enough information that they wanted to devote very, very scarce resources into trying to study that. And that is kind of scary. So it really is the Wild West of the healthcare system.
I just had that at the top of my brain that it sounded like the Wild West. So we're certainly on the same page. And how problematic do you think this area is still? Do you think that the FDA has been a bit more muscular in whatever research they're doing, just because you put some information out there that they really had to take notice of? Do you think it's still kind of risky out there, problematic if you pick something up off the shelf and you're not really, attuned to the idea that you might be picking up something dangerous to your health?
Yeah, I think we've gotten some good penetration through major media trying to get the word out about some of these products, and I think the New York Attorney General has had very profound beneficial effects, where now if you go into a general nutrition center store or you go into a CVS, those companies looked pretty bad when they went through and they found that the drugs didn't have active ingredients in them when they did some of that testing. So they're now only allowing drugs on their shelves that have been independently tested at some of those laboratories. But outside of those two companies, none of the other companies have said every product that goes on our shelves are going to be independently tested before it goes out there. So unless it has that USP or that NSF or consumer lab seal, you don't know whether it's been independently tested or not. Now, some of the products will say, well, we sent our things out for independent lab testing, and they'll put the test results on their website. But the problem is, you don't know if they sent it to be tested 174 times and they're only putting the one that passed up there. Or if they sent a product, it passed, and then they changed their manufacturing process to one that was much cheaper after it passed. Right? What happens when you get the USP or the NSF seal is that you are agreeing and you pay up front to have them test your product. But they go to the store shelves and they pick those products off periodically and they retest them to make sure that they're still within specifications. And even though you paid, if they fall below specifications, they take away your overall seal. If you just go to a lab, they may really, really want your business, and the results may not be what you want them to be. Yeah.
So let me ask this: when you're standing there and there's a the row goes on forever, the vitamins and the supplements and the dailies and all of that business. Just for the layman or for the lay woman, is there one or two things that we should be looking for to say, okay, this seems reasonably safe? Or are there one or two things that we should look for to say, nope, this looks really problematic, other than these seals?
Yeah, I mean, I think the seals are the biggest thing, right?
Okay.
And then the second is what store you're in. If it's a general nutrition center or a CVS, then you can be relatively sure that you have that. Outside of that, it also comes down to just because on a website they say something is pretty good. Like, we ended up evaluating cinnamon, and we found that there was some very minor beneficial effects on blood sugar. There was some very minor effects in terms of blood lipids. But when you go on like one of the websites for some of the companies, what they've done is they've had selection bias, horrible selection bias, where they only are putting the information that was really beneficial up on their website. And they're not putting all of the other studies that have been done in the literature that showed that it had little to no effect. And they create the impression, when you go from several of the different sites that are trying to sell the stuff, that everyone knows how great this natural product is. And the reality is, in a lot of cases, what you're seeing on those websites is a fictionalized thing. Even though they bring you to a study, they're not bringing you to what all of those studies are looking like.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that is a big part of what we've tried to do in the area of dietary supplements. And, I talk about both kratom and CBD products. CBD products right now, if you go around, you would assume that they're great for everything. But the reality is, for childhood seizures, they're really, really good. And if you're about to undergo some kind of anxiety-producing event, the data is decent. But in most everything else, the data is really, really, really scant.
Wow. Well, that's a popular product out in the world now, and the commercials tell me that everything is fine. Dr. White, the commercials have told me, right? Capitalism. So this is absolutely fascinating, and this is like some wonderful service just to the community. I'm wondering what you're working on now, and what's next.
Well, our big thing, and so I see that Adrian is on there. We've been working this year doing a lot of things in the area of COVID. So we've made a lot of people really, really mad because we've shown that hydroxychloroquine has virtually no benefits, and that the benefits of remdesivir is not nearly as good as what you would assume. When we showed with hydroxychloroquine for the treatment of COVID-19 that therapy was not being effective, we then turned on the news and we heard that it was 96% effective, and we were shocked and horrified as to well, what is the data that we're missing?
Exactly.
So we went on to this medical organization that was the one that was touting to Fox News and Breitbart and all these other people this thing. And actually how they measured effectiveness was whether or not the drugs were given to people and how many of those people ended up living that they were giving it to, right?
Yeah.
So no way in the world would anyone ever use this definition in the scientific world or in the real medical world, but in this fictionalized one, they made it, and then they had the ability to be able to get the word out to their people about how effective that therapy was. And many people were being scammed, and a number of people who needed hydroxychloroquine for their systemic lupus erythematosus, for their rheumatoid arthritis or other inflammatory diseases, had a very hard time getting hold of the drug.
Yeah.
Because it was being used in a similar kind of world to what we're looking at in dietary supplements, where there's reality, but then there's this fictionalized reality that can be created that can end up scamming people. So it's a similar kind of research area, trying to go through and really seeing what does the evidence truly show about these things, trying to make sure that we can, protect human health and then stop people from doing things that may be harmful for their health when they think that they're trying to do the right things for themselves.
Yeah. And so that's what's happening now. That's the research that you're working on now.
That's what we're doing now. Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm also curious about some of the things that you have worked on before that are, really exciting to you, and just kind of getting a feel for the different areas that you really get enthused about.
Yeah, in our systematic review work, a lot of it is going through and trying to verify or trying to put things together. And, in some of those cases, you end up going against, like the work we do for the Evidence-Based Practice Center always makes you be the enemy of some very powerful group, right?
Yeah.
So you end up doing a systematic review, and then you show that this company's products isn't nearly as good as they said it was. So now the company, wants to attack your work.
Wow.
But if you show that it's really, really good and the drug is expensive, then the insurance industry is really, really unhappy because they're the ones that are going to pay for it. And then they want to try to attack your work. So when you do work in systematic review, you have to have a really, really thick skin. And you have to make sure that you do everything that you're supposed to do very, very meticulously.
Yeah.
Because everyone wants to look at it, because the stakes are so high in terms of dollars and cents when you're talking about prescription drugs, to have the results of the study show that it either is or is not effective. And you have two diametrically opposed forces, and neither one of them are going to be happy at the same time. Sure.
Well, certainly this vitamin research, what's on the show, that's got to be, daggers and spears coming at you, because that is, I don't know, $1 billion business. It's got to be a huge, driving business. And so I can imagine there was some folks looking at you cross-eyed.
Yes. And, not just the people that are trying to sell them, but there are many different layers of people who were involved in dietary supplement world, including the people that are manufacturing them, but also the people that are generating their likes and their views and their other things as a way to generate income by touting the value of some of those products, or trying to steer people towards some of those products versus others. So that is a very hostile environment to be in as well.
It sounded like a bit of an understatement, I have to say. So we're my last question. We're kind of moving backwards. We're kind of moving to what's happening now, and then back to the origin story. And I'm so fascinated by how people begin their career. Like, what was the thing that sparked for you that said, this is the kind of work that I wanted to do? Like, what door opened for you that put you on this path?
Yeah, when I was at the Albany College of Pharmacy, the cardiology faculty person was the first fellow that my mentor, Moses Chow, ever had. And I ended up being the last fellow that he ever had. He ended up leaving UConn and becoming the dean of the pharmacy school in Hong Kong.
Wow.
after that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was actually amazingly awesome for my career, because I started out and then he left the continent, and I ended up being able to move into that position. So it really, springboarded me ahead with what we were able to do.
Mm-hmm.
But, that faculty person, what I really liked about him in that area is everything was evidence-based rather than just mechanism-based, or, how you felt about something based.
Right.
Show the evidence. And I really liked cardiology for that reason. And
Mm-hmm.
since he was an influential person when I was a student, I wanted to be trained where he had been trained. And there was really, at that time, the PharmD degree was relatively new in the country. And there
Mm-hmm.
were really only 3 godparents of all of the cardiology faculty people in the country. And he
Right.
was one of the 3. So I was really glad, when I applied, to be put into that position, and then to get a faculty position, and be able to try to continue that work. We ended up moving it out of animal research and into human research, but to be able to continue that line of research and that type of research was something that was very gratifying to me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I said that was the last one, but I told a little bit of fib, because you've had a lot of success and a lot of awards, but I just got to talk to you about being a television and a movie star, like what that feels like. You're a regular on Fox 61, but Vogue and Newsweek, and I mean, you're really out there in the media, and it's really, really impressive. What happens when the camera comes on?
So, the media is really the only other option that you have to be able to impact patient care. Mm-hmm. And so the work that we do for a lot of us in pharmacy practice, I think that the overall impact is much greater than the fiscal benefit to the university. The contracts are not quite as lucrative. They're not for as many years. But I think the flip side of that work is that it's extremely relevant to patients' everyday lives.
Yes.
So rather than just put it into a journal and then, see if organically it'll get picked up and will impact patients' health, there are some things that directly need to be said to patients. There's not a patient that's going to go to JAMA and look at any of those articles. There's no one that's going to go somewhere else. The companies have no vested interest in trying to take that information and try to push it on to individual people. So if you really want them to know about it, it has to be your effort trying to get it out into the consciousness of those other people. And even though Dr. Bug Stevens is crushing me right now with like 2 million more views and downloads, I think the thing that we both have in common is that you want to take the research that you're doing that is really, really relevant to patients' lives. In his research, it's the effect of blue light on people's overall health. And you want to make sure that everyone knows about it. And that's really what I'm trying to do.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, I think after today, a lot of people will think that pharmacy is pretty sexy, I have to say. Well, you know what? We've had a really wonderful conversation. I have so enjoyed your talk today, and to be able to be in conversation with you. You even let me tease you about the rabbits. So I really appreciate that. And you're right. This touches us where we live, right? And so wasn't quite sure what the QTc was all about. Their interval was all about, but I really gleaned a lot about what we pick up in a very casual way to put in our bodies, and just how much care, we need to exhibit about that. And just take a minute to read, because, these folks are making money, off of us, which does not mean they actually care about the efficacy of what we're picking up to buy. So I just want to say thanks for today. I really appreciate it. Congratulations on the Board of Trustees Distinguished Professor Award. Well deserved. How long have you been here at the university?
I've been a fellow from 1996 to 1998, and then a faculty person since 1998.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, this has been absolutely wonderful. We have a couple of minutes if there is a question from out there that somebody would like to ask. It's kind of amazing how shy the faculty gets in moments like this.
Yeah, while any questions may be coming in, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. And, I hope it was something, regardless of where you came from, that it was something that you were able to take away from as well.
I'm telling you, I'm going to go sweep my cabinet right now. My wife will be looking at me cross-eyed, but I'm saying, baby, you have no idea what kind of danger people are putting. We got to get rid of this stuff. So I really appreciate it. I think we're going to close out, but I just want to say thanks again. It's always good to chat with you. We've chatted on a couple of different things, just in the last couple of weeks that have been very helpful. So I absolutely agree with Phil and with Carl. The work you're doing in pharmacy is absolutely amazing, and there are lessons that the rest of the campus can learn, just about the work that you're doing as well. So thanks again, Dr. White. We really appreciate it. I see
you
coming in. It just says great talk. Thanks. He's a really smart guy. Thank goodness he's still good with the rabbit. I'm teasing about the rabbit part. All right, all right, Doc. It's good to talk to you, and we'll see you later. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, take care.
Thank you.